When the theme Unstable for Ludum Dare was announced, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I spent the whole day outside suddenly thinking how cool it would be to make an original Game Boy game with no idea what it was about. So when I returned home, I started researching. To get the look and feel of the original Game Boy, the system used a resolution of only 160 by 144 pixels, which translates to an aspect ratio of 10 by 9. To get the visuals right, the game will only use a 4 color palette like the original. So it was actually made in shades of grey, but you will most likely remember the green colours, which was caused by the illumination of the Game Boy screen. I used and found these 4 colours just by looking around online for the most accurate colour representation. I then created this 160 by 144 size sprite and imported it to Unity, and then set the camera accordingly. The most important of all was setting every sprite to fill each Unity unit of exactly 8 pixels, creating 8-bit grids. So I never actually had an original Game Boy at all, but I did have Pokemon on the later systems, so that was really what I used as my point of reference going forward, as I couldn't quickly find any top-down shooters like I'm about to make. Then, by the end of the day, I created 4 movement directions for the player that were animated. After I thought about the theme a little more, I somehow thought about an instability of power, where the word imbalance just popped out into my head. So the game will be about a soldier fighting off an alien swarm attack on their spaceship while they have to stabilize 2 separate engines. So I created a bar that is constantly fighting in the middle. It can shift dramatically in either direction. If the bar is to hit either side, the game is over, representing the engines being thrown too far out of balance. To make it interesting, the player must gather a resource of fuel, which they can only hold a limited amount of, and then deliver it to the appropriate engine to push back the bar in the correct position right in the middle. Now, to prevent the bar from constantly flip-flopping all the time and never actually fully throwing the engine off, I made it so that when the bar hits a certain secret threshold, it becomes absolute and keeps heading towards its impending doom, until the player makes it exit the absolute threshold, of course, by fueling it up. So I made 3 kinds of enemies to keep the combat interesting. The first one is a slug that does not shoot and only has 1 HP, which is fairly easy to eliminate, but will charge at you at a faster pace than the others, making it still somewhat of a threat. Then we have the basic humanoid alien thing with a gun. It will still move towards you, but just a bit slower. It will then shoot in front of itself every couple of seconds. It will take 2 hits to kill, making it more difficult, but keeping it as our most neutral enemy. Then I made this giant floating parasite looking thing with wavy arms. This will be the hardest of the 3, with a lower spawn rate, taking 3 shots to kill and firing in all 4 directions at the same time. It also moves towards you at the slowest pace. To keep the gameplay balanced, I created this point system for the spawners. It tallies up the difficulty of the current enemies in the map and stops spawning them after about 8 points. The first 2 enemies are 2 points each, while the third one makes up 3 points. When the point system is under the threshold, it will spawn a new enemy every few seconds. As for the player, I wanted to recreate the stiff directional movement of the original Game Boy D-pad by preventing any directional movement. The player will also take 3 hits before they die, but killing enemies gives a small chance of dropping a health repair kit. The player can shoot from their laser pistol as fast as they want, but there is an ammo count to make sure the player plays more conservatively with their ammo instead of just spamming it everywhere. There was also going to be a laser sword melee attack, but I ran out of time, so I upped the amount of ammo rewarded for enemy drops. Lastly, the player can easily defend themselves from attacks by just shooting the enemy bullets, which again makes your ammunition a lot more valuable. So sound was pretty easy. I just used this popular program SFXR to generate a bunch of sound effects for every different interaction in the game that just creates 8-bit original old school sounding sounds. Then for music, I created this very short, fast looping track in a program called... I punched in a random bass line from this random key, then some tremolo style guitar, which sounded a tad Norwegian, and I thought it was good enough and ran out of time to expand upon it. Since it's pretty bad and repetitive, I lowered it in the mix for the game just a tad, but both of these programs gave me the satisfying crunchy 8-bit sounds we all remember, just a little bit worse. So if you're interested in playing the game, there's a link in the description below, and if you want any help making an 8-bit game like this, feel free to message me or comment below.